Andrewtate adjusted the cuffs of his fitted blazer and smirked as he stepped onto the stage. The venue, a sleek modern auditorium in downtown London, was packed. Hundreds of women, feminists of all ages and backgrounds, filled the seats, their expressions ranging from wary curiosity to open hostility. The event had been advertised as a dialogue on gender and attraction, but everyone knew why they were really here. Tate had been invited by an ambitious feminist debate society to share his perspective on relationships, attraction, and success. The organizers, a panel of young, intellectual women, believed they could challenge him, tear apart his arguments, and expose him for what they saw as a fraud, a self-absorbed, misogynistic internet personality whose views had no place in progressive society. The moment he stepped onto the stage, a wave of murmurs and quiet boos rippled through the crowd. He let them simmer. He enjoyed it. "Ladies," he began, his voice carrying an effortless confidence. "Before we start, let me say that I respect your courage for being here. I know most of you think I'm the enemy. You probably came here to hear something offensive, get mad, and storm out. But here's the truth." He clasped his hands together, leaning slightly forward. "I was invited here to give you advice on how to be more attractive." A collective groan mixed with laughter erupted from the audience. Some women shook their heads. Others whispered each other, clearly unimpressed. Tate chuckled. Yeah, I get it. Who is this guy to tell us anything? But let's be real. You wouldn't be here if a part of you wasn't at least curious about what I have to say." A young woman in the front row, wearing a smash the patriarchy hoodie, crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "Curious? No, we're here to debunk you." "Fantastic," Tate said, flashing a grin, "because I love a good challenge." He took a slow step across the stage, scanning the audience, measuring the energy in the room. The cameras were rolling. His opponents were eager. And he was ready to play. "I'll keep it simple," he continued, gesturing toward the audience. "Rule number 1. Femininity is power." A woman in the third row scoffed loudly. "That's rich coming from you." Tate shrugged. "Call it rich, call it reality. The truth is, men and women are different. And deep down, no matter how progressive society tries to be, human nature isn't changing anytime soon. You want to be more attractive? You want to get what you want out of men? Embrace your femininity." A woman with short, dyed blue hair stood up. "So you're saying women should just act weak and submissive?" Tate grinned. "See, that's the problem. You think femininity is weakness, but it's the opposite. Femininity is strength. The most powerful women in history weren't trying to act like men. Cleopatra didn't wear cargo pants and talk about how strong and independent she was. She used her beauty, her charm, her wit, her femininity to conquer empires." More murmurs spread through the audience. Some women shook their heads. Others exchanged knowing glances. But Tate saw something else in a few of them: curiosity. They weren't fully convinced, but he had their attention, and that was all he needed. From the side of the stage, one of the feminist panelists, a woman named Jessica, with neatly styled hair and a sharp blazer, stood and took the microphone. "I think we've heard enough," she announced. "Mr. Tate, your entire premise is flawed. Women do not exist to cater to male preferences, and your idea of attraction is rooted in sexism and manipulation." A round of applause broke out. Several women cheered. Tate merely smiled. "You can reject reality all you want, but reality isn't rejecting you." Jessica's nostrils flared. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tate clasped his hands behind his back. "It means, despite what you say, most women still prefer strong, dominant men. And most men are still drawn to feminine women. You can fight it, deny it, shout about patriarchy, but in the end, the truth wins." More boos. The room was turning into a battlefield. One woman stood up. "So you're saying women should just be quiet, wear dresses, and let men run everything?" Tate shook his head. "Not at all. I'm saying, if you want to be attractive to high-value men, you need to understand what men actually want. Or, hey, ignore everything I said, do the opposite, and see how that works out for you." Jessica cut in, her voice rising. "And what if women don't want to live by your rules? What if we want to be successful, independent, and not cater to male fantasies? Tate chuckled. That's fine. But don't complain when you're 40, single, and writing Twitter threads about how men are intimidated by you. That did it. Shouts of outrage erupted. Some women booed. Others yelled at him. A few stood up as if ready to storm the stage. Tate simply stood there, smiling. This was exactly what he had expected. And it was only the beginning. The auditorium had transformed into a battlefield. Shouts echoed from every direction. Women were standing now, waving their arms, their faces flushed with anger. Some were pointing fingers, others clutching their phones, likely live-tweeting their outrage. Andrewtate simply stood at the podium, watching it unfold with an amused smirk. He had seen this reaction before. In fact, he had counted on it. Jessica, the feminist panelist, stepped forward, gripping the microphone tightly. Mr. Tate, you are the walking embodiment of toxic masculinity. And quite frankly, you don't belong here. Loud cheers erupted from the audience. Tate cocked his head. You invited me. Jessica's jaw tightened. Yes, and now I see that was a mistake. He chuckled. You didn't invite me for a discussion. You wanted a spectacle, someone to gang up on so you could feel morally superior. Well, congratulations, you got your spectacle. But I'm still standing here, unfazed, while you're losing your minds over basic facts. The room shook with outrage. Basic facts? Shouted a woman from the third row, her face red with frustration. You're spouting archaic garbage. Women don't exist for men's approval. Tate shrugged. Did I say you did? I simply pointed out that attraction is a two-way street. You can't demand men find you attractive just because it makes you feel empowered. Attraction isn't political. It's biological. Bullshit. Tate turned toward the voice. It belonged to a woman with sharp cheekbones and thick glasses, her fists clenched. Women don't need men. We are successful, independent, and happy on our own. Your outdated views are irrelevant. Then why are you so angry? A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. If you're so happy, why does my opinion bother you? Why are you here, screaming at me? Tate continued, his voice dangerously calm. If men don't matter, why do so many of you spend hours online complaining that men aren't good enough, that dating is miserable, that you can't find a real man? The woman's lips parted, but she had no response. Let me tell you why. Tate went on, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. Because deep down, you do care. You do want strong, capable men in your lives. You do want to be desired. And when reality doesn't match the fairy tale you were promised, you lash out instead of adapting. More shouting. Jessica raised a hand, trying to control the chaos. This is nonsense. You act like women should be grateful for male attention. Tate snorted. Not grateful, just realistic. Jessica sneered. Oh, please. You preach about femininity like it's a magic spell. But here's the truth. Women don't need to cater to men. We don't need to be softer or more feminine to attract someone. We exist beyond that. Tate clapped sarcastically. And yet, despite that independence, men aren't marrying you. Birth rates are plummeting. Modern dating is a disaster. Women are lonelier than ever. That is reality. The tension in the room thickened. Even the women who had been nodding along with Jessica's every word hesitated slightly. Tate saw it. He had struck a nerve. You can argue all day, he continued, but you can't argue with results. The happiest women in relationships, the ones in love, taken care of, thriving, are the ones who embrace their femininity. The ones who try to compete with men, act like men, resent men, they're the ones writing articles about how dating in 2025 is impossible. Jessica scoffed. And let me guess, you blame feminism for all of this? Tate smirked. You blame the patriarchy for everything. Why can't I return the favor? The crowd erupted in angry jeers. Someone in the back yelled, Get off the stage. Tate raised his arms mockingly. Come on, ladies. Is this your equality? You claim you want to debate, but the second you hear something you don't like, you start acting like toddlers. Jessica slammed a hand against the podium. We're not acting like toddlers. We're calling out bullshit when we hear it. Are you? Tate leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Or are you just scared that deep down, I might be right? The room went silent for half a second. Then chaos. Women were on their feet, yelling over each other. Some were trying to argue. Others were just shouting in frustration. Jessica's face burned with rage. She turned to the event organizers, clearly ready to shut this down. Tate just stood there, arms crossed, completely unfazed. Then, the first chair scraped against the floor. A woman in the middle row shot up, glaring at him. I refuse to sit here and listen to this misogynistic crap. Another woman followed, then another. More murmurs spread through the crowd. Some were looking at each other uncertainly, deciding whether to leave in protest or stay and fight. Jessica seized the opportunity. If you agree that this man has no place here, stand up and walk out with me. Let's show him that his outdated views have no power here. More chairs screeched as women rose to their feet. Tate smirked. Running away? I thought feminists were strong. Jessica ignored him and took a step toward the exit. Tate's voice cut through the commotion like a knife. But before you leave, answer me this. Jessica froze. So did the crowd. If I'm so wrong, Tate said, his voice steady, why does your dating life suck? Silence. A palpable, suffocating silence. Jessica's face twitched. Excuse me? You heard me. Tate gestured toward the audience. Most of you are single, or you're dating guys you don't respect, or you're in situationships with men who don't commit to you, and you know it. A ripple of discomfort spread through the room. Tate tilted his head. So if feminism is so empowering, why are so many of you unhappy? Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tate chuckled. That's what I thought. More women shifted in their seats, uncomfortable now, glancing around as if hoping someone else had an answer. Jessica clenched her fists. This conversation is over. And with that, she turned and stormed toward the exit. A handful of women followed, but not as many as she had expected. Some hesitated, clearly torn. Others sat back down, arms crossed, frowning, but listening. Tate's smirk widened. He wasn't winning them over, but he had planted the seed. And that was enough. The tension in the auditorium was thick enough to cut with a knife. Some women had already left, their angry footsteps echoing through the hallways. But others, perhaps more than expected, remained seated, arms crossed, jaws clenched. They weren't walking out, but they weren't happy either. Jessica, standing by the exit, hesitated. She had expected a mass exodus, a grand display of unity against Tate's so-called toxic masculinity. But instead, many of her fellow feminists stayed put. Their expressions conflicted. Tate noticed, and he wasn't about to let her leave on her own terms. Oh, come on, Jessica, he called out, arms outstretched. Don't run away just yet. Stay a little longer. You were so passionate a minute ago. Jessica whirled around, fire in her eyes. I'm not running away. I'm refusing to waste my time on you. Tate smirked. And yet, here you are, still talking to me. A few women in the audience snickered, quickly covering their mouths. Jessica's jaw tightened. I stayed because you need to be held accountable for the garbage you're spreading. You act like you're some wise authority on relationships, but you're just another insecure man trying to control women. Tate nodded slowly, as if considering her words. Then he leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. If I were just another insecure man, you wouldn't be this mad. Jessica's face twitched, but before she could fire back, Tate kept going. The truth is, you're angry because what I'm saying hits too close to home. I'm not the cause of your frustration. I'm just the guy who's pointing out the obvious. He gestured toward the audience. You want proof? Fine. Let's get real. He turned to a woman in the front row, a brunette with glasses who had been quietly observing the entire debate. You, he said, pointing at her. Be honest. What kind of man do you actually want? She blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. If you could design your perfect man, what would he be like? Go ahead, tell the truth. No judgment. The woman hesitated. I mean, someone who's kind, respectful, emotionally available. Tate grinned. And she swallowed. And ambitious, confident, someone who can take charge. Tate snapped his fingers. Boom. Thank you. He turned back to the crowd. Notice what happened? She started with the politically correct answers, kind, respectful, emotionally available, but when pressed, she admitted the truth. She wants a strong man, a leader, someone who takes charge. Jessica crossed her arms. That doesn't mean she wants to be submissive. Tate smirked. Never said she did. But she does want a man who can take the lead. And that's exactly my point. Feminists scream about equality, about not needing men, yet they still crave men who are strong, dominant, and capable. They want the benefits of traditional masculinity without admitting it. More murmurs filled the room. Some women shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. A few looked at each other, as if silently confirming what they were thinking. Jessica, however, wasn't backing down. That's ridiculous. Women don't need to justify their preferences to you. Tate raised an eyebrow. Oh, but men have to justify theirs all the time. When men say they want a fit, feminine woman who respects them, society loses its mind. That's sexist. That's objectification. But when women demand tall, successful men with six-figure incomes, crickets. Silence. Tate let the moment stretch before delivering the final blow. You don't hate my views. You hate that I refuse to lie to you. The auditorium was at a breaking point. From the middle rows, a blonde woman suddenly shot to her feet. That's enough, she shouted, her voice cracking. All eyes turned to her. She took a shaky breath. You sit up there, acting like some guru, but you don't know anything about women. You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and have people judge you only by your looks. To constantly be told that your worth is tied to whether a man finds you attractive. Tate nodded. I hear you. But you know what's funny? Men are judged all the time, too. Just not in the way you like to admit. The woman scoffed. Oh, please. Tate leaned in, voice deadly calm. A man's entire value is determined by what he can provide. His money, his status, his ability to protect. You think men have it easy? Walk into a bar as an average woman, and 5 guys will offer to buy you a drink. Walk in as an average man, and you're invisible. The blonde woman faltered. Tate pressed on. And that's fine. That's life. But don't sit there and pretend that men don't face brutal expectations too. The difference is, we don't complain about it. We accept reality and adapt. Maybe it's time you did too. The woman's eyes glistened, but she sat back down. Jessica, clench your fists. So that's your message? That women should just accept reality and pander to what men want. Tate laughed. No, Jessica. My message is that no one cares about your feelings. The world isn't fair. It never was. The sooner you stop expecting life to cater to your ideology, the happier you'll be. Jessica's face turned red. She had spent years debating men like him. Arrogant, egotistical, obsessed with their own voices. But this was different, because, to her horror, some of the women in the audience were nodding. A few women still had their arms crossed, still defiant, but others looked thoughtful. Some exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. One woman in the back raised her hand hesitantly. Tate pointed at her. Go ahead. She swallowed. I don't agree with everything you're saying, but some of it does make sense. Jessica's head snapped toward her. What? The woman hesitated. I mean, he's right about the dating scene. A lot of us are struggling, and maybe there's something to what he's saying. Jessica looked around, realizing that the tide was shifting. She had to shut this down. She took the microphone and turned to the audience, her voice shaking slightly. Ladies, don't be fooled. This man doesn't care about helping us. He wants us to doubt ourselves, to second-guess everything feminism has achieved. Tate yawned dramatically. Right. Because women are never allowed to think for themselves, huh? Jessica ignored him. We know our worth, and we don't need validation from men like him. So if you agree that his views have no place here, then leave. Show him we won't be manipulated. Another pause. Then a few women stood up, but not as many as Jessica had hoped. Tate smirked. Guess not everyone's as brainwashed as you thought. Jessica's fingers curled around the microphone. This isn't over. Tate grinned. Oh, I hope not. He had cracked their armor. And now, the real battle was about to begin. Jessica stood frozen, gripping the microphone like a lifeline. Around her, the room was split. Some women still seething, others shifting uncomfortably, and a few actually considering Tate's words. She had to end this. Now, you're a fraud, she spat. Your entire brand is built on insecurity, on manipulating weak men into thinking they need to dominate women to be happy. Tate chuckled, says the woman who just tried to manipulate half this room into walking out. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jessica's composure cracked. You don't empower men, you just prey on them. Tate shrugged. Funny, I could say the same about modern feminism. The crowd gasped. Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Silence. Tate leaned in, voice low and final. You lost. Jessica's jaw clenched. She turned to the audience one last time, but the energy had shifted. Some women still scowled at Tate, but many looked unsure. Without another word, she dropped the mic and stormed off stage. A mix of claps and stunned silence followed. Tate smirked, adjusting his blazer. Well, ladies, this has been fun. And with that, he walked off, leaving them to wrestle with the truth.